Now let's talk about different ways of hitting the cymbals. I've got quite a wide range of cymbals on this kit, and it's important to know that crashes are hit differently than the ride, hit differently than the hats, even maybe the china. So you need to know that you can't just hit every single cymbal in the exact same way. In the beginning, I don't think this is as important. In the beginning, you're kind of just trying not to miss things. You're kind of just trying to hit them when you want to hit them. But I think it's really important to be aware of the fact that you can't hit the ride in the same way that you hit the crash, because you're going to do damage, I think, maybe to both. Then I'll just start with the hats. The way that you're going to hit the hats will be with the edge of the stick being the contact point. So when you hit the hats, the point of contact will be the edge of the stick and the edge of the two hats. That doesn't mean that's going to be the case all the time. The further I got into drumming, the more I realized that I want to play dynamically on the hats. I especially remember seeing, I think it's the music video for Still Waiting by Sum 41. And Steve, the drummer, he played this really fast pattern on the hats, and I saw this motion. Like he had this whipping motion going, like it was a loud note and then a soft note and then a loud note and then a soft note. And I'd never seen that before in my life. That was the first time. And I found that so interesting. And I started kind of trying to emulate that, and I found that that's such a cool and efficient way of playing fast. And what actually happens when I play now, when I do that now, is that I use the edge of the stick and the edge of the hats for kind of the loud note, and then the soft note I play with the tip of the stick and the top of the hats. So if I play that really slow, just so that you can see what happens, this is what it looks like. I know it's really like prominent and pronounced if I split them up like that, but if you play fast, I don't even think about edge tip, edge tip, edge tip. I don't think loud, soft, loud, soft. That motion is just such a natural motion to hit the hats for me, especially at high speeds, and especially if you want to introduce some dynamics into playing the hats. So it's not robot / caveman Kobus playing like this again. It's kind of a nice little dynamic way of playing the hats. And I until quite recently, actually, I didn't even know that it was edge tip, edge tip. I was just going for the dynamics. But I think it's a nice way to think about it if you want to clarify it to yourself and kind of grasp the way of playing the hats. There are many different ways and contact points on these cymbals that we call the hi-hats for different sounds. We have a whole section dedicated to that. But now I just want you to know that when hitting the hats, stay aware of the whipping motion once again, same technique that we use for the drums, and stay aware of the fact that it is really important to play hats dynamically. Sometimes you kind of want to play the straight strokes. It works for some songs, but I'd say most of the time I love using that kind of dynamic way of playing the hats. It's just so much more efficient as well when you get up to high speeds. Now the ride. Most of the time when I hit the ride, I use the tip of the stick as the contact point, and the top of the ride obviously is what I'm hitting. So most of the time it'll be the tip of the stick touching the ride on the top. That's the kind of the signature ride sound. When I move onto the bell though, I kind of alternate. Sometimes I'll play the bell with the tip of the stick. If I want like a really soft little bell sound, it's just a little bit different than the normal ride sound. But if you want like a really loud, pronounced bell sound, then I go to the edge of the stick, using that as the contact point, hitting the bell. You can actually also use the edge of the stick when you hit the ride if you want a really washy, filthy, crashy, kind of loud sound. But I'd say for the most part, by far for the most part, I use just the tip of the stick as the contact point for the ride sound. So that's what this looks like. So you'll see I use the same dynamic method with the whip and then kind of the tap. So it's a whip, tap, to just get that dynamic range on the ride. It's the same motion that I use on the hats, and it's the same motion that I use when I fill on the toms, that kind of whip motion. So that's really important, just stay aware of that. That's kind of the normal ride sound. I'll just play another example where I incorporate the bell as well, and I'll switch between using the tip of the stick as the contact point and the edge of the stick as the contact point on the bell, so that you can hear the difference in sound and volume. So there's a huge difference in sound between using the light little tip against the bell and using like the really thick, heavy edge of the stick, like the full weight of the stick on the bell. There's a huge difference tone-wise, the attack is a lot different, and also volume-wise. It's a lot louder if you kind of lay into the bell of the ride with the edge of the stick. You can crash the ride if you want to. In other words, hit the edge of the ride with the edge of the stick. You can do that. It works especially well if you have a crash ride. So in other words, a ride that's kind of designed for that. But if I crash this ride, which is a really heavy, bright TRX ride, which is kind of made for that articulated sound, if I crash this one, it won't sound the same as a crash ride. It'll be like a really, really loud, heavy, trashy sound. I mean, that works perfectly in some instances, but like I said, for the most part, it'll be tip of the stick on the top of the ride. Next up, crashes. These are kind of the opposite of the ride in terms of contact point. So with these, sometimes I'll use the tip of the stick on the top of the cymbal. I think I like using that technique more than most drummers because I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with the little bell sounds. But most of the time with crashes, it'll be the edge of the stick and the edge of the cymbal. I want to mention right off the cuff, really importantly, do not hit through the cymbal. So it's not like golf or another sport that you play in your country where you kind of hockey. So it's not like golf or hockey or like certain sport techniques where you're taught to hit through the ball to get more distance. If you do that with cymbals, you will hit through the cymbal, and that would suck because you're going to hit through the cymbal. I cracked many cymbals when I started playing. Luckily, they were really cheap, low quality cymbals, but well, they weren't cheap to me then, but I was really distraught. But I cracked a lot of cymbals. I cracked crashes, rides, even hats, because I was hitting through them. There was no technique involved. It's really important to know that you're hitting the crash itself, so that is your point where you're going to stop. You're not hitting through it. You're not like climbing into the crash. You can play really loud. The motion can be really big. I do like that, but it's always important to note that you're stopping on the crash. You're not hitting through it. That's really important. You can hit through it if you want to. If you've got the cash and you really want to crack cymbals, then by all means go for it. But if you want to keep the cymbals intact and not hit the poo out of them, then don't hit through them. But like I said, usually edge of the stick, edge of the crash. This counts for the splashes as well, and even the China to some extent, although the China is a little bit different in the fact that you're kind of using the edge of the stick and this little bulge of the China for the most part. It's a very different sound when hitting the edge of the stick on this little bulge and hitting the edge of the stick with the edge of the China. It's a different sound. It's got a lot more attack if you hit the edge of the stick on this bulge. In the same way, if you use the edge of the stick on the ride itself or the edge of the stick on the crash itself, it's a totally different sound. But like I said, with crashes, splashes, maybe not so much the China, I'd say crashes and splashes, edge of the stick, edge of the cymbal, don't hit through the crash. Really important. So these are just some tips to hopefully save you guys some money on cracked cymbals so that you don't have to buy new ones every other month. And also hopefully to allow you to get good tones out of your cymbals and to make them sound as good as they can.